Hi, I'm Elliott Forrest from WQXR, and welcome to another Artist Check-In. Today, an old friend, Grammy Award-winning violinist Joshua Bell. Lovely to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. Nice to speak with you too.
Last time we chatted, you had asked me to host your first concert post-COVID, if I can use that expression, at Tarrytown Music
That's right.
Hall. But that even seems like a long time ago. Are you feeling like now that you're back on tour and people are coming back, does it really feel like it's over, like we're in a whole new phase?
In some ways, it really does feel like we're back. Like back to the old days, back to the craziness of touring, which I have, which is a mixed blessing in some ways. There's a craziness to this sort of life, which I sort of got used to waking up every morning and having my coffee and practicing slowly for myself and in a very calm way. I went on about a year like this, which was a fascinating experiment as an artist. But I am very grateful to be back. Everyone has just a better appreciation for live concert experience than they don't take it for granted anymore, and I think it's actually good for our art.
Right. I think you're exactly right. I think people are having this visceral experience. I remember the first time I heard a live instrument, a human voice that I was in the same room
Yeah.
with, and I felt it physically because yes, I could hear recordings and I could play music on speakers, but when I was in the same room, you must feel that with the audience as well.
When I first started playing in front of an audience, there in Tarrytown, and also in Europe, I went to Madrid and did a trio concert with Stephen Isserlis and Alessio Bax. I remember that was one of the first things, just playing in front of an audience. It was actually very emotional.
You recently played live on WQXR, a concert with the New Jersey Symphony. You've got a very busy summer. That's only the beginning of this season, right? I've seen your calendar. You've got stuff almost all the time coming up.
The New Jersey was, I guess, technically the end of the regular season, and then a few days break and summer stuff's starting to happen, and it has its own excitement for me. Going back to some places that I go fairly regularly, like I'm on my way to Vale at their Bravo Music Festival, where I love to go because I get to bring my orchestra, the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields, and doing programs like Paganini Concerto and Schumann Symphony, Second Symphony, which I just adore, and I get to lead and direct that, and going back to Tanglewood and Verbier and other places that I go fairly regularly. So summer season is I enjoy as well.
You have this new album out, the Butterfly Lovers. Tell us about the main concerto that's on the recording.
I was asked to come play in Singapore with the Singapore Chinese Orchestra and a conductor, Tsung Ye, who I had played with in Indiana 30 years ago when he was music director in South Bend, Indiana. So he was now music director of this Chinese orchestra, which involves very different instruments. And he said, "Come to our orchestra. We haven't played together in years, but come. We have these arrangements of pieces that I know you play, which is Saint-Saëns' Introduction around a Capriccioso and Meditation from Thais, from Massenet, and Zigeunerweisen from Sarasate. We have arrangements for Chinese orchestra and violin." And I was fascinated by the idea, and I went to play there and enjoyed the orchestra, and was really enamored with the sound of the erhu and the pipa and all these exotic wind instruments colors that I had never heard before. It's really fun to hear under this album. Those little pieces are included as well just in a way that one would have never heard before. But then a few years later, since I developed this relationship with the Singapore Chinese Orchestra, I thought maybe now's the time to do this. Take a look at this Butterfly Lovers that people keep talking about, and I got the music and I listened to a few recordings of some Chinese soloists, some Western soloists who had taken it upon themselves to do it, and I started thinking, you know what? I use the same criteria I do for any piece of classical music. Like, does this music move me? Do I feel like I can say something with this that maybe hasn't been said, or put my own stamp on it? And it passed the test. I thought, you know what? This music is very moving. I feel like I have something I can say with it. And decided, great, I have I know this orchestra in Singapore. They're Chinese instruments. Let's do this together, and that's how this recording came about.
It's stunningly beautiful. It's in many movements, and the arrangements of the other works you talked about too are incredibly beautiful. As you said, you come from a Western tradition of playing. Was there a different style or a different technique you had to learn or adapt for the Butterfly Lover?
Well, it's ironic because the piece written in the 50s by two Chinese composers was written for Western instruments. So it was not written for the erhu, although I think there are arrangements now, and it was not even written for a Chinese orchestra. It was written for Western orchestra, and which I think they saw that as an opportunity to sort of reach Western audiences with some of the Chinese idioms, but using Western instruments. So when I approached it, I listened to a lot of players. The erhu would be the closest Chinese instrument to the violin. It's a two-stringed instrument that relies on various kinds of glissando or slides, because you have to go up and down just only two strings. There's not a lot of crossing of strings, so there's a lot of this very vocal sound that because of that. Listened to as much as I could of that, and tried to allow that style to kind of seep into the way I would just naturally play the music on the page. So it's finding that middle ground of being inspired by a certain tradition and yet being true to one's approach to the instrument.
It's a beautiful title too, Butterfly Lovers. Is there a story?
Yeah,
there's
a story.
To this?
Oh yeah,
what is it?
The music is very programmatic. It's based on a legend, a Chinese legend, which goes back like close to 2,000 years. It involves a Chinese girl who wants to study. She comes from an intellectual family, wants to study in a time where girls were not encouraged to study, so she dresses up as a boy and goes to study for 3 years at this place as a boy, and there she meets another boy who they become best friends. But she falls in love with this boy, but has to remain, can't reveal her identity. Anyway, to make a long story shorter, eventually the identity is revealed. They both fall in love, but her father has already committed her to be married to someone else. Sound familiar? So it's and he's heartbroken, dies of basically a broken heart. She eventually is also heartbroken, doesn't want to marry who she's supposed to. She basically jumps into his grave, commits suicide. A little bit like Romeo and Juliet.
Romeo and Juliet, yeah.
And the idea, it's very metaphorical, but the idea is that she joins him in the grave, and out from the grave come these two butterflies, which represent the two characters that they end up living in nature together.
You've had a long-running relationship, not just with QXR, but with Bob Sherman, who's retiring now after almost 70 years on
God.
WQXR. You were on the Young Artist Showcase, I think, with him. Do you remember that first appearance with him?
I do. I remember Bob Sherman back. I must have been. It was very early on, pre-recordings for me. That I might have been around the time that I did my debut with the Philadelphia Orchestra, and I remember making a trip from Philadelphia as a 14-year-old and going on the Today Show with Gene Shalit, and an interview with Bob Sherman around that time. He was great, and you're great at what you do. And WQXR is I can't imagine life without WQXR. I mean, I live on that station.
Well, thank you so much. I think once you and I clock at 70, maybe we'll step back too, but maybe not, It's like, I think you and I and Bob is a great example. We do what we love, and it's been a gift to be able to do that.
Yeah, we are very lucky to do, what we love and be in the arts, and I am optimistic about the future of classical music post-pandemic. I think it's a struggle for organizations for a while, and I think and for artists for a while, but I think in the end we're going to come out well on the other end, and hopefully with an even deeper appreciation for live music, and hopefully for radio too, classical radio.
Do you know what else you might have done? Was there some other trajectory that might have propelled you in a different direction?
What would I do if it weren't for music? It's very hard for me to imagine not being a musician, but I do have a lot of other interests. I was always very much into sports as a kid, so I was loved playing tennis. I don't know, probably couldn't have become a professional player, but during the pandemic, I played basketball every day. That was lost 20 pounds, which I've gained back now. But during the pandemic, I was really doing a lot of sports again. Love mathematics, love science. I couldn't imagine being a science researcher. I like advertising. I have my phone is full of advertising campaigns that have come up for various products that I've never really, but it's just a hobby of mine, like coming up with wordplay and I have a lot of other interests outside of music.
You've commissioned a lot of works. Anything coming up new?
Actually, this summer is quite exciting for a new commission that I've been involved in. It's called The Elements. It's a concept I had trying to come up with something programmatic in the way that like Vivaldi's Four Seasons or Holst the Planets or something programmatic in that way. I thought about doing something with the elements, the ancient elements of earth, wind, fire, water, and I've added a fifth, which is sometimes referred to as the fifth element, which is space or ether, the ether. But in this case, we're calling it space. And I've asked five of, I think, the most celebrated and wonderful composers in America at the moment. Kevin Putz, who's just genius, who just wrote this amazing opera at the Met, and I'd heard his music with Time for Three, my friends, that amazing trio, and I was blown away by his music. So I asked him to write Earth, and then we have Edgar Meyer, my old friend from university, amazing bass player and composer. He's written Water, and Jake Hagee's written Fire, and Jennifer Higdon Air, and now Jesse Montgomery is about to deliver Space. So that's five really great composers, and these all different very different voices, but put together as one suite. Is going to be, I think it's going to be spectacular. I love the music that I've seen so far, and we'll be doing it at the New York Philharmonic at the beginning of the season in September with Jaap van Zweden conducting. So very excited about working on this with these composers.
We'll very much look forward to everything coming up in your life. Joshua Bell, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Elliott. It's great to see you and to talk with you, and until next time.